Welcome to Renal Anatomy. You can find this on pages 196 and 199 of your Nurse Workbook 2.0, or you can print the pages below this video so you can follow along with me, or always come back to test your knowledge. The purpose of this video is to go beyond this nurse workbook, but give you real-world nursing education as well. And in this lesson, we're going to combine the first 2 pages of our renal anatomy and combine it together to lay a foundation down so we can build upon harder concepts as we go. The kidneys are truly the unsung heroes of our entire human body. They have so many functions and they're so important for all of us to live our lives every single day. Not only do they remove waste products, but they're helping us stabilize our homeostasis, keeping everything normal around the body, managing our electrolyte balance, that acid-base balance. They're removing toxins, and they're also helping with red blood cell production. There's so many things that we have to think about whenever we're thinking about our entire renal system. So not only is it important to help our patients understand what to do if they develop renal conditions, but how we're gonna formulate our care to these patients with these kind of conditions. So we're gonna jump right in. So we're gonna start with a macro look of our whole entire renal system. And we're gonna start with something that's pretty familiar from our previous videos, especially in our cardiac section. So we have our superior vena cava. We also have that inferior vena cava. And although they aren't directly a part of the renal system, they both carry deoxygenated blood from the upper and lower half of the body to that right atrium in the heart. However, the inferior vena cava is the one that carries deoxygenated blood that is cleaned by the kidneys from the lower body back to that heart. And once that blood reaches that right atrium, it's going to eventually get injected into the lungs where it drops off that CO2, picks up the new O2, comes back into the heart through that left atrium, ejected out the left ventricle out to the aorta. And our aorta not only has our ascending, but we also have the descending aorta. And right near the descending aorta is going to have that oxygen-rich blood that branches off of it. And this is going to be the left and right renal arteries. And these are going to supply our left and our right kidneys. The position and structure of these renal arteries ensure that our kidneys are receiving a high volume of blood for filtration. So these kidneys are responsible for all those jobs we just talked about, going to be filtering blood to remove waste and excess fluids. They're going to help regulate our blood pressure. They're going to maintain that electrolyte balance, that acid-base balance, and erythropoiesis, which is going to be that fancy word for red blood cell production that we're going to get more into in a future video here in this renal section. On top of these kidneys is our adrenal gland. And these glands play a critical role to help the body's response to its stress and metabolism. And it does this through the secretions of hormones such as this cortisol, our aldosterone, and our adrenaline. And that aldosterone in particular is going to be that hormone that helps us regulate that water-sodium balance, help maintain that homeostasis, and help with our blood pressure. Branching off of our kidneys is these little things called ureters. And they are responsible for transporting urine from the kidneys to the bladder. This will ensure an efficient removal of the waste products from the body. So these tubes are really essential for drainage, but they're also really important for backflow. So urine doesn't just come right back up our ureters once it sits in that bladder, and those tubes help keep it down. So our bladder is going to be a temporary storage for urine until it's going to be excreted from the body. So the bladder is a muscular sac, and it's going to expand to help let the ureters bring more urine down to it. But the bladder is also going to contract whenever it's time to eliminate the urine inside. And the urethra is the final pathway for our urine to exit the body. And this is going to help discharge that bladder by this little tube. So now we want to go even more in depth, and we're going to go inside our kidney. And we're going to start by going through the exterior layer of the kidney. That's going to be this fat layer. And this fat layer is what helps protect our kidney and then we want to go down into this renal pelvis. The renal pelvis is going to collect urine from the collecting ducts that are produced in the kidney, and it's going to funnel it down to these ureters. So we know that blood is brought to the kidneys by these renal arteries, but from there, the renal arteries are going to dissect it into small capillaries, and it's going to entwine with nephrons. And these nephrons are going to be located up here, and this is at the edges of this kidney. So we're going to go more in depth into this nephron in the next anatomy page. So this right here is our nephron, and before we get really deep into this nephron's job, we're going to go really basic. So we want to think of a nephron as a high-tech recycling plant. And this plant, or this nephron, is where our blood is going to enter to be processed. Once it's inside this recycling plant, there are three main tasks. Our first task is filtration. And this is where that nephron filters out waste and excessive substances and turns them into urine for excretion. Its second job is reabsorption, and it recovers and returns valuable resources such as our water and our electrolytes and puts them back into our bloodstream. And lastly, it's responsible for secretion and additional filtration. And throughout this process, the nephron ensures that the factory itself, this kidney, receives the necessary blood supply to continue operating efficiently. So this way, the kidney is meticulously cleaning the blood, maintaining that electrolyte balance, and also taking care of its own needs. The kidney has its own needs, so it wants to make sure the kidney is running smoothly so it can do all these other functions. We're going to put this into real life on this nephron, or this blood recycle center, and we can do this by seeing how the blood passes through this nephron. So remember, our first job was filtration. So our blood is going to enter the nephron from the renal artery, and it's going to go into the glomerulus. And this is where that first stage of filtration of blood occurs. So water, salt, glucose, and other small molecules are going to be filtered out of the blood, leaving larger proteins and blood cells behind. This filtered fluid is now called filtrate, and this is going to collect into the Bowman's capsule, and that surrounds the glomerulus. This is going to lead us into our second task, the reabsorption. From there, the filtrate, which again is water, salt, glucose, and small molecules filtered out of the blood, is going to move into this proximal tubule. And this is where a significant amount of this water, sodium, glucose, and these ions are going to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream through these peritubular capillaries. And these capillaries are going to extend up and down right here. They surround the nephron's tubular parts, which is these yellow tubes you see, and it facilitates the reabsorption secretion of substances between the blood and the inner lumen of the nephron. And our filtrate is going to continue down the descending limb of the loop of Henle. And this is where it becomes more concentrated as water is reabsorbed into the surrounding tissues that increases solute concentration. So this area that we see right here is going to be an important part of the nephron that our medications such as our loop diuretics, our thiazide diuretics, they all come into play here, and we're going to learn about that later. The filtrate will keep moving up the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. This is where the sodium and chloride ions are actively pumped out of the filtrate. And here comes our third task, the secretion and additional filtration. So our filtrate is going to head up the distal tubule where further regulation of sodium and potassium occurs with additional adjustments to the filtrate that's influenced by aldosterone. Aldosterone is a steroid hormone that's produced by these adrenal glands that we saw that sit up above our kidneys, and they're going to help regulate that blood pressure and electrolyte balance. The final adjustments of filtrate are going to be made in this collecting duct, and this is where water reabsorption is adjusted to control urine concentration. So this filtrate is now going to be formed into urine, and it's going to move towards the renal pelvis. And this little tube right here is another nephron connected to it. After all of this filtration, the remaining blood that isn't filtered is going to exit the glomerulus through the efferent arterial, which is this arterial from the glomerulus. So this is going to supply that blood flow to those peritubular capillaries that support that reabsorption and secretion process of the nephron. So this goes back to that third job that we said the kidney has, which is taking care of itself. And after passing through the nephron and these peritubular capillaries, it's then cleansed, and deoxygenated blood collects into the branches of the renal vein and eventually exits the kidney for recirculation around the bloodstream. So in order to assess the health and function of this complex blood recycling system, we're going to rely on these key values down here that provide a marker of how effective the kidneys are at performing their critical tasks. So this first one we see is creatinine, and this is going to be a waste product of muscle metabolism. And since this muscle metabolism is occurring at all times throughout our body, this is a way we can see how well our kidneys are actually clearing this out. So a normal range is going to be 0.7 to 1.3 milligrams per deciliter. And this is a healthy sign that this clearance is happening without difficulty. So if we see this number that is elevated above that 1.3, then we know that the kidneys are really not doing their job. They're not clearing out this creatinine. Urea is produced in the liver as a waste product of protein metabolism, and urea is going to be excreted by our kidneys. And a healthy urea is 7 to 20 milligrams per deciliter. If we see a high urea in the bloodstream, this is telling us that our kidneys are dysfunctioning. And our eGFR, or our estimated glomerular filtration rate. So this is going to be a calculated value that estimates the rate of blood flow through the glomeruli. This serves as a critical indicator of how the kidney is functioning and its stage of renal health or disease. And we want to look for an eGFR between 116 to 130. Lastly, we have our normal urine output. So this is going to provide an indication of how effectively our body is excreting waste of metabolism through water and electrolytes. So our normal urine output is going to be 0.5 milliliters per kilo per hour. So our patients with severe renal impairment are going to actually have a lower normal urine output. This can be called oliguria. And this means that it's slowing down. They're not making as much urine. And essentially that's saying that our kidneys are not doing a very good job, and they definitely need to be looked into because there's some kind of underlying condition going on. So overall, these lab values are going to help us diagnose, guide treatment decisions, and monitor our kidneys if there's any kind of disorder or dysfunction going on. So we're going to talk so much more about these labs and how we can see them in other stuff in future lessons. This concludes our renal anatomy. I will see you in the next one.